Welcome. Thank you for joining us and for being part of this very important topic, multilingual learners in FSL programs. My name is Joanna Jackson Kelly, and I am an ESL ELD coach itinerant at the OCDSB.
And my name is Antonia Satine, and I'm an FSL instructional coach at the Ottawa Carleton District School Board.
We would like to acknowledge that our meeting is taking place on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory. We would like to thank the Algonquin Nation for hosting us and recognize their enduring presence on this land.
As instructional coaches, we get so many questions regarding the programming for ESL or multilingual learners in the FSL classroom, and we have had many discussions on this topic over the years. We realized that our MLs and FSL learners have lots in common, and we have been discussing similarities in strategies while teaching them. We created this very short video to share some of these strategies with you.
Appuyons les élèves d'anglais langue seconde dans les classes de français langue seconde.
Teaching ELLs in FSL programs.
Les élèves d'anglais langue seconde et de français langue seconde sont les deux apprenants de langue additionnelle.
They are both additional language learners using additional language learning strategies. Let's look at some similarities.
Nous nous reconnaissons. Quelles sont ces similarités? Pour appuyer les deux groupes, il faut d'abord connaître les élèves.
It all starts with knowing your learners. We need to help them feel free to take risks in a welcoming environment.
Il faut créer un environnement accueillant où l'élève se sent à l'aise de prendre des risques. La voix de l'élève est un élément important pour engager les élèves dans leur apprentissage.
Student voice is important to promote ongoing engagement and involvement of students in their learning. English language learners use the literacy skills they have in their first language to access academic vocabulary in additional languages.
On peut utiliser la langue première pour s'aider dans la matière que l'on apprend. Pour les apprenants français langue seconde ainsi que les apprenants anglais langue seconde, la différenciation et la conception universelle de l'apprentissage, CUA, sont essentielles.
In support of both FSL and ELL students, we need to differentiate our practice and use Universal Design for Learning, UDL. Our accommodations are based on what we know about the learner.
On utilise une adaptation continue pendant l'enseignement.
We meet the students where they are at and support them according to their needs.
On va à l'encontre de l'élève où il se trouve dans son continuum d'apprentissage et adapte notre enseignement selon ses besoins. Si nécessaire, on peut modifier les attentes du curriculum pendant un certain temps.
If necessary, an ESL program can be modified for a student for a period of time.
Nous pouvons également différencier et adapter notre évaluation.
Evaluation practices can always be differentiated and accommodations can be made when necessary.
Voici quelques idées pour appuyer tout apprenant de langue additionnelle.
Here are some ways we can support all additional language learners in any language.
À la base de tout enseignement langagier, on développe les capacités orales, l'écoute et la communication orale.
The base for all language learning is the development of oral language skills, listening and speaking. Oral language skills merit lots of practice, as they are the base for reading and writing skills.
Les compétences à l'oral sont à la base de la lecture et de l'écriture. D'autant plus, il faut enseigner le langage académique explicitement pour s'assurer que tout apprenant ait accès au curriculum.
We need to teach academic language explicitly to ensure all learners have access to the curriculum. Literacy competencies are transferable from one language to another, so students will improve in all languages as their literacy skills develop.
Le transfert de compétences littéraires va aider aux élèves de développer les compétences dans chaque langue apprise.
In conclusion, English and French language learners share some common characteristics and can benefit from using similar additional language learning strategies. Knowing our students, differentiating to meet their needs, and focusing heavily on listening in addition to speaking, benefits any second language learner, including ELLs and FSL programs.
Bref, les apprenants d'anglais langue seconde et les apprenants de français langue seconde ont des caractéristiques en commun et utilisent les mêmes stratégies d'apprentissage de langue additionnelle. Connaître ses élèves, différencier pour combler leurs besoins et mettre de l'emphase sur l'écoute ainsi que sur l'oral bénéficie tout apprenant de langue additionnelle, y inclut les élèves d'anglais langue seconde dans les programmes de français langue seconde.
The ability to speak both of Canada's official languages helps prepare students for their role as active and engaged citizens in today's bilingual and multicultural Canada. It benefits multilingual learners to be in French immersion programs. It is their right to be in French immersion programs, and this right represents equity for all students' chosen pathways. As well, FSL programs help develop plurilingual citizens, which benefits our Canadian society.
Mindsets about students in the ESL program or multilingual learners in our FSL programs may be based on misconceptions about how languages are learned and the brain's capacity to learn languages. These misconceptions may negatively affect access to programs when, in fact, multilingual learners do as well as or outperform English-speaking students in FSL. Why do they excel? MLs already have language acquisition strategies that they have used or are learning to use to learn English or other languages, and they use these strategies to learn French more quickly. Multilinguals are also used to taking risks and are therefore more likely and more confident to try. Often, multilinguals can see the benefits of second language learning more clearly as it is part of their reality. Let's also remember that when in the FSL classroom, all students are second language learners. So the MLL student is participating in a more level playing field, and their language challenges stand out less.
Here are some questions to think about regarding equity and pathways for all. Are parents receiving accurate information about FSL programs? And is this information available to all parents? Do our current procedures and practices reflect equity and inclusion in their approach to FSL education? Are there barriers in our schools that restrict multilingual learners' access to FSL programs? Are our programming decisions for multilingual learners based on individual student strengths, needs, and interests? And finally, are all students welcomed and respected in our FSL programs? Here are some welcoming tips for multilingual learners and newcomers at your school. These tips support the students and their families in feeling welcome, respected, and valued in their new classrooms and schools. It will support their engagement and success at school. These tips involve having meetings with families when they arrive at your school, involving students and staff, and getting to know and connect with your students and their families. Some examples are ambassadors to the classroom, creating welcome books for students, creating a welcome team at your school, as well as many more helpful tips to ensure your students' engagement and success at school.
Let's have a closer look at how we can support MLs, multilingual learners, in FSL programs.
First, it is important to know your students. If you have newcomer students who are multilingual learners, they may have gone through a voluntary planned immigration process. They may be international students. They may be permit or visa students. They may have left their home country due to crisis or under conditions of extreme urgency, such as refugees. If you have multilingual learners who are born in Canada, they may be from Indigenous communities. They may be born into immigrant communities. They may be born in communities that have maintained distinct cultural and linguistic traditions, or they may have attended French boards of education. Part of knowing and programming for our multilingual learners is using culturally relevant and responsive practice. This promotes a sense of belonging, engages all learners, allows them to see themselves reflected in the curriculum and in their classrooms. When getting to know and programming for your students, using culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, CRRP, is essential, along with having a deep knowledge of your students and high expectations. Here are 2 videos explaining the importance of this.
I now know what I do not know. I understand that there are some fundamental differences in worldview. What I've come to understand is that there are different relations, different ways of viewing the world, different approaches to experience, different senses of collective responsibility, family, healing, and place.
For a teacher, starting to use culturally responsive pedagogy, I would first and foremost recommend that they know their students, that they understand where they're coming from, that they listen to their questions, because that will form the basis of exceptionally interesting learning and opportunities for the teacher to facilitate new learning and inquiry, and certainly heighten the interest that the students have in everything that they do, because it will so very much relate to their community and what they know.
So as you can see, we're dedicated to the Mississaugas of the New Credit. It's a First Nations group that's related to us in Toronto. To have more experience on what students like is the best thing you could possibly do. To kind of understand how your students feel and have empathy, or to understand their situation better would be good.
As a Chinese person who had experienced racism, teaching Indigenous kids in the Okanagan in the 1970s, where I was teaching high school, I thought, well, I'm not white, I'm anti-racist, I know the program, I've got an agenda here, I'm right behind these kids in solidarity, I can help them. But I didn't take the time to learn and know about the place, about its history. I just returned to that place to find out more about the Spalumchin people, okay? About the place, about the history, about the kin. And to be quite honest with you, I was unable to teach those kids. So if we're serious about culturally appropriate pedagogy or culturally responsive pedagogy, we can't take some model off the shelf or assume that there are 5 universal steps that apply to all First Nations kids, or that apply to all migrant kids alike. Those would be the reinvention of a bunch of stereotypes. What we actually would need to do would be to open our eyes and our ears and our hearts to communities, to what they know, to their elders, and what they teach, as best as we as outsiders can do, and to the strengths and knowledges that kids bring to communities.
That sounds like a good plan.
Really move, it just comes down, and then when you let it go, there it goes. It just grows. Let it go, let it go, let it go.
I really need to. It's critical because we have been trained to expect very little from children. If teachers, family communities, leaders expect certain segments of the population to perform low, then they will be satisfied with minimal gain. Now, what does it take for teachers, principals, superintendents, the public at large, to look at that little child sitting there who normally is expected to be on the bottom and see a physicist, chemist, mathematician, writer, lawyer? How can they look at that child and see that so that they stretch to make sure that that happens?
Did anybody notice the height of the bridge in the picture?
It's actually 8.5.
The approach that we've taken is we can do what we want to do, we can achieve the goals. We have high expectations and we have perseverance. And that growth mindset piece, those two things together, the high expectations that come from the curriculum document and the permission to make mistakes and the encouragement to persevere has really become a formula for success like no other.
I'm hoping that they have problem-solving skills. I'm hoping that they have skills, those soft skills that help them in the workplace, like working with others, collaboration, being able to communicate with each other in a positive way, even if there's conflict. I think those are sort of the soft things. And also, obviously, like the math. I want them to come back with knowledge of area, perimeter, measuring, using different tools. So all those curricular things and also the non-curricular, sort of hidden curriculum things too. Well, we can problem solve, we can change a world.
22, 23, 24.
He tells us not to give up. He always encourages us to try harder. He doesn't always want the right answers. He just wants to see that you tried your best. Because like he told us this one time that if you already know what to do, you're not learning. If you don't know what to do, you're learning how to get better at it. I feel really great because like that he shows me that I can be myself. I can make mistakes because he doesn't want us to be perfect. He wants us to be the best we can.
The fundamental role of a teacher is to help kids exceed their potential. And that's what those excellent, passionate teachers do. They know you can do better. Now, they also happen to be usually very well equipped to make you do better. But they never accept what you think is good enough.
Now we have to measure the area.
I look at my students as competent. I look at them as critical thinkers, and I look at them as students who are able to achieve anything that I put in front of them. So once you raise the expectation and make it much higher, you'll get a much better success overall rate.
I think there has been a change as well from a focus on what students do not have to what they bring to school, a more assets-based approach rather than they don't know how to do this, they don't have the language, and a whole litany of what students do not know how to do. To the focus on now, what do they bring to school? The cultural competences that they have.
Okay, what did I learn? I was only like measuring just like the picture and not thinking about the bench. So Mr. Rentier warned us, like, it's also the bench. There's the light.
The understanding. Many of our children, even those from immigrant students from war-torn countries, it's amazing the experiences they bring to school. So I am pleased with that change in education that is much more focused on assets, and we go from there, building upon the assets rather than focusing on the deficits.
Where do student profiles fit into our support of multilingual learners in the FSL classroom? As we develop student profiles, we get to know our learners so that we can identify how best to help them learn. How do they learn? What are their strengths and challenges? What motivates and engages them? How do we do this? We regularly make observations, we listen, and we ask questions. One tool we can use to document student learning that is available to all teachers in the OCDSB is the VLE. Using the VLE, we can get to know our learners by documenting their learning and their progress. We can document the progress of our students, and students can make their own contributions as well. And we can follow the students' progress through their grades so future teachers and students can witness the progress being made. How motivating for students when they get to see their own progress. How motivating for us when we can also see that progress, and how helpful it is to determine where to go next. The first and most important step in supporting our MLs is to focus on oral language and vocabulary development. Supports include teaching sentence structures, using gestures and actions, using images and facial expressions. Supports also include speaking in French, as by contrast to learning English, we are often the only ones our students hear speaking in French. An additional support is not speaking to the student in English, a language which they don't understand yet either. Here again are some more recommended practices to support multilingual learners in the FSL classroom. Differentiating for the FSL student is key, whether they are an ML or FSL student. Each student will be at their own level of language proficiency, and the CFR descriptors will help us to determine where students are on their learning journey. Differentiating helps us to support students in engaging and authentic learning. Assigning coloring, copying, playing online games, or other make work when students don't understand the language will not help them to better understand it and keep them engaged. Rather, if we assign work the student is not yet able to do in an additional language, we can have them do the work in their own first language, and we can use Google Translate to understand what they have written. We can have them find keywords or expressions in the target language, French. We can teach them sentence structures to help them express themselves. We can use the strategies above to help them access the work, and we can have them use critical thinking skills to engage in the learning where they are.
Metacognition is defined in growing success as the process of thinking about one's own thought processes, or as thinking about thinking. As students reflect on the learning strategies that work best for them, they begin to take responsibility for their own learning and develop greater autonomy and confidence as learners. So it is essential to involve students in their learning. To do this, be explicit, develop a visual checklist, use pre-reading and pre-writing exercises, and ask students to reflect on the process they used. You can also use a portfolio, conferences, give descriptive feedback, and the student and teacher can use assessment as and for learning to move the students forward in their learning journeys.
In order for students to learn how to interact in French, they need multiple opportunities to practice interacting, and cooperative learning affords them such opportunities. When learning cooperatively, students can feel more confident taking risks because they're speaking with a few or even one other person. Speaking in a small group is less intimidating. The more practice they get, the more confident they become and their language skills develop. Here are some ideas for helping students be successful in cooperative learning. One of the keys is to teach students the necessary sentence structure for working with others. Plan ahead to determine what phrases they will need and teach them explicitly one by one. The neuralistic approach is great for teaching sentence structures.
Multilingual learners bring their assets with them to support their learning. One of these important assets is their first and/or additional languages. Literacy in their strongest language can transfer directly to another language and support them in their learning. Multilingual learners' strongest language, usually their first language, but it can be an additional language, is important for students to use to access academic vocabulary in English and in French. This should be a direct transfer from their first or additional language directly to English, and then from their first or additional language directly to French. This transfer helps them with understanding concepts and academic language in every subject area. Another important part of supporting students is using the collaborative approach for the whole student, involving school teams and the students' families to support programming and learning for students. This is essential to ensure students as whole beings are having their needs met. The following are two case studies. You will note that Luciana, in class, I would ask the student how to pronounce their name, is in core French in grade 8 and has a modified ESL program. There is a whole team, student, and family approach. As well, there are transition meetings for chosen high school and life pathways. Ahmed, in class, I would ask the student again how to pronounce their name, is an EFI in grade 1 and is not modified in the ESL program or FSL program because in grade 1, all students are beginners in French. There are meetings with parents regarding French immersion, which includes a teacher, but it can include a multicultural liaison officer, MLO, school team, and family meetings regarding supporting the student in EFI. In addition, it includes team meetings regarding strategies to support this student. These case studies are from welcoming English language learners into French as a second language programs, a Ministry of Education document. To show you the actions of the schools, in each case study, I have highlighted the actions taken regarding background information of the student, connecting with families, and school team planning with the family and student. The yellow represents the background information, connecting with families and school team, family and student planning. The blue represents the result of this work. They are the strategies needed for the students to be successful. In case study A, you can see how much work has gone into supporting this student and how many strategies have been suggested and implemented to ensure this student's success. In this second case study, you will notice there is more connection needed with family, student, and the school team, as every student and family needs different support. If you would like to look at these in detail, as this is not a live presentation, please look at Welcoming English Language Learners into French as a Second Language programs. Next, we will discuss some tips regarding programming for multilingual learners and about report cards. Using UDL, Universal Design for Learning, as well as differentiation, CRRP, and the curriculum to inform your planning are part of the first steps to program for multilingual learners. This work should be implemented first before considering accommodations and modifications in the ESL program. It is essential for all educators to understand the distinction between accommodations and modifications, as well as the importance of providing either or both. These measures contribute to fairness and social justice for many students in an increasingly multicultural environment. First, let's start with what are accommodations? If consistently using UDL, differentiation, and CRRP are not moving the student up the French curriculum, you can use the accommodations in English or French. Accommodations are adaptations made to instruction, assessment, and environment. Use of visuals, graphic organizers, oral interviews, and small group instruction. Accommodations do not alter the provincial curriculum expectations. They are teaching and assessment strategies, human supports, resources, and/or equipment required to enable a student to learn and to demonstrate learning. And accommodations are available to all students. Some accommodations are instructional, assessment, and learning resources, as indicated on this slide. Now, what are modifications? How are they different from accommodations? If UDL, differentiation, CRRP, and accommodations are not moving the student up the French continuum, you may provide modifications for newcomers and Canadian-born multilingual learners. Certain MLs may require curriculum modifications in some subject areas temporarily while developing French language skills. The decision to modify curriculum expectations must be made on a case-by-case basis in each subject area. Modifications can be made when multiple sources of evidence suggest changes to curriculum expectations are needed to enable the student to access the grade level curriculum. Modifications for MLs may be made at grade level and may change the number of complexity of expectations. Modifications may be made below grade level temporarily to support the acquisition of a concept or skill by MLs in the early steps of language acquisition. Parents, guardians must be informed that modifications will be made prior to evaluation. In addition to providing accommodations, adjustments, modifications might be made to the number and/or complexity of curriculum expectations and/or performance criteria when a student has not yet developed French proficiency to achieve grade level expectations. Evaluation will be based on the modified expectations. Modifications might include one or more of the following adjustments: eliminate parts of a curriculum expectation, substitute new vocabulary to replace vocabulary in the expectation, limit the language requirements in the expectation. The ESL-ELD box gets checked on the progress report or report card when a teacher makes modifications to curriculum expectations, not accommodations, for a multilingual learner in any subject area. The ESL-ELD box can also be checked for MLs who have an IEP. Do not check the ESL or ELD box for accommodations only, nor check the ESL box to indicate that the student is participating in an ESL or ELD program. Can a rider statement for a multilingual learner be included in a comment box? The quick answer is no. The ESL box can be checked if the student is modified. There is a legend on the last page of the progress and provincial report cards that explains what it means when the ESL-ELD box is checked. It states, ESL-ELD, achievement is based on expectations modified from the curriculum expectations for the grade to support English language learning needs.
Let's have a look at some considerations specific to the French immersion and core French programs. To confirm, the ESL-ELD box can in fact be checked for an ML in core French or French immersion. Yes, for a period of time, on a case-by-case basis, if modifications are made to some or all of the subject expectations. Modifications may need to be made for students in early stages of language acquisition. Observations need to be made continually to help the student progress with the aim of eventually not needing to check this box anymore. As we come closer to the end of our presentation, we would like to share these great links with you of more information of how to welcome, support, and program for the MLs in your FSL classroom. We have included ministry documents, supporting documents, videos, and contact information. In these documents on the left, you will find key messages and examples of how to support students. Supporting documents include information about our learners and how they learn. Our videos give you more ideas for supporting students. And our FSL scope and sequence of 40 action-oriented tasks gives lots of ideas on how to get to know your student, on how to teach language structures, including ideas for language structures for a particular task, and many online resources available to support student learning. You can keep in touch and stay current by checking out our FSL Google Currents, by exploring our FSL YouTube channel, and by attending or requesting coach support sessions.
Here are some additional French resources that we used for this presentation and/or that we created for multilingual learners in FSL. Here are some resources that can be used in English and/or FSL programs. And if you would like access to any of these resources, you will find the PowerPoint in the description of the video. Thank you so much for being part of this important conversation regarding multilingual learners in FSL programs. We hope that you have a magnificent day.
Merci, au revoir.
Au revoir.